Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today, we're here with the legendary Dr. John McDougall. Thank you so much for being here today. Please tell us a little bit about yourself, the books you've written. I actually read The Starch Solution.
Right.
And your newest one, The Healthiest Diet on the Planet, just
Right.
came out. So tell us a little bit about this and how you became one of the leaders in the field.
Oh boy, it's been a long, long trip. I've been in medicine for half a century.
Wow.
Yeah. In the first 10 years, I was training and I was practicing like a regular pill-pushing doctor. Mm-hmm. And fortunately, I had some things happening to me in those first 10 years that changed my life and changed the way I thought about patients and practice. So for the last 40 years, I've been doing the same thing, which is taking care of people with something that's officially known as diet therapy.
Okay.
And there should be courses taught in medical schools called diet therapy. What medical students learn in nutrition classes is a little bit of biochemical formulas. They have no idea how to use diet in prevention or treatment of disease, yet the literature is extensive. Research is unquestionable about the effects and benefits of diet therapy. Well, I've been for 40 years taking various avenues, not necessarily to know the truth, because I learned the truth very early on, but to try and get other people to listen and to make changes. And so that's what Mary and I, my wife, my partner in life for the last, we worked for 46 years.
Wait, can we just share the story of how you fell in love with her at first sight?
Oh, you really want to hear that?
I do. I think people will love it.
Well, I was a medical student, and she was a surgical nurse working for the most famous orthopedic surgeon in the world, and I don't exaggerate. And we met in an operating room repairing a hip.
Wow.
And I didn't see anything but her eyes, and of course the rest of her, but not her face. She had a mask on. And but I fell in love right there in that moment. It's not like I was an inexperienced young man either.
Yeah.
So anyway, it took me 3 weeks to get a date. Very wonderful young
That's
woman.
right. Go Mary.
Yeah, really. But I got a date, and once I got the first date, she never went home.
Oh.
Pretty much, yeah.
And then 6 weeks later.
6 weeks later, we were engaged. 6 weeks later, we were married. And it's because of two things that my parents taught me. One is that you must be honest about everything, and including how you feel about things. And Mary was the only woman I ever dated who I really knew I was in love with, and I was honest with myself. The other young women that I'd gone out with, there were various reasons I liked them.
Yeah.
But I was never in love.
Yeah.
So my parents said I had to be honest. Second, they said with myself. The second thing they said is, John, you'll have to marry a happy person because you'll never make her happy.
Oh.
And I took it personal. I said, you're talking about, you can't change people is what I'm trying to say. You have to find somebody who's innately happy.
Yes.
And Mary was that kind of person. So we've been together 46 wonderful years, done some amazing things together, including sailboats and airplanes and ski condos. And probably most proud of was the fact that I have 7 grandchildren. And I've been in practice for 40 years. And Mary's been by my side in that practice for pretty much the whole time.
She's an amazing woman. I've actually met her. She's here today. Okay, well, let's get into the questions. Why is starch so important, and how much starch should make up our diet?
Well, this is the most serious misconception that people have, is they don't understand what starch is in terms of the importance for human nutrition. People are starchivores. They're starchitarians. They're starch eaters. Until you learn that, you will fail. I guarantee it. Because you're hungry all the time, or you're eating foods that make you sick all the time. The human diet has been a starch-based diet through all of human history. If you take and look at research done, thousands of papers, thousands of different places in the world, what you find is that the main source of calories from various populations, successful populations, there are a few peripheral populations that we can talk about, but all large successful populations of people throughout all of verifiable history have obtained the bulk of their calories from starch. I want to give you some examples. Mayans and Aztecs, 1,300 years of civilization. They're known as the people of the corn. They lived, they fought, they did athletic events on corn. South of that, in the Andes, the Incas, for example, ate potatoes. They had 400 different species of potatoes, and their diet was primarily potatoes until they went to battle, and then they changed it to quinoa, because quinoa was easier to carry than potatoes. And I guess there's some rumors that made them stronger than potatoes, but I don't think so. If you think of Asian countries, first thing that comes to mind is rice. Like, for example, before 1980, 90% of the food on the plate of the average Asian was rice. It was white rice, 90% of the food. And at that time, we had a population of people in China, well, all of Asia, 2 billion people at that time, 2 billion rice eaters, where 90% of their diet was coming from rice, and they had virtually no heart disease. I've talked to women from Japan who've lived through that period of time before the 1980s, and I asked them, did they ever see a case of breast cancer in Japan? Never.
Wow.
This same group of women asked me to give a lecture on breast cancer to the women in Japan now, because there's lots of breast cancer in Japan now. Type 2 diabetes, fewer than 1% of the population in Asia, I'm particularly talking about China, before 1980, fewer than 1% of the population had type 2 diabetes. In a JAMA article published in 2013, that's the Journal of the American Medical Association, they bragged about how 12% of the Chinese population is now frankly diabetic, and half are pre-diabetic. The reports since 2013 have been even more incriminating of the harm of the American diet causing diabetes and all kinds of health problems. If you visit China or other parts of Asia, what you find is people looking like Americans. So it's all changed.
The Tarahumara Indians run, what, like 175 miles a day, and they eat mainly beans, corn, and squash.
Well, Tarahumara Indians are a unique population in the sense that they split off from the Pimas about almost 300 years ago. So the same genetic people. The Pimas, they went to the Southwest, particularly in Arizona, what we know as Arizona now, and they were put on a government reservation and fed American food. The Pimas have a population now where over 60% are diabetic. Obesity, not just being overweight, is about 50, 60%. So they're a very sick population of people. Genetically, the same people are the Tarahumara Indians who live in the Copper Canyon in Mexico. And they're known as the running people, as you well know. But their diet is corn, rice, and beans. But they have low cholesterol, and they average about 140. They have no heart disease. They run, you mentioned 12 miles a day. I don't know, I've heard even more.
I was just watching something that said like 100 miles a day, 100 plus miles a day.
That sounds like a lot.
It does sound like, maybe that was a week. Maybe that was a week.
I think that was a week.
Maybe a week.
But except for the fact that
they run a lot.
now they're intimidated by the cartel, the drug cartel. That's where they go to hide at the Copper Canyon. So it's a tough life for the Tarahumars right now. But when I first started studying them back in the 1970s and 80s, along with Connor, who wrote the papers on it from OHSU, showing that there was no heart disease, no obesity, extremely healthy people living on corn, squash, a few vegetables, that was it. No dairy, almost no meat, probably no meat.
Yeah,
and they still live that way. They're still quite isolated. But it's evident to everyone who studies it that people who live on corn, beans, rice, potatoes, sweet potatoes, starch, are always healthy, trim. They were the gladiators of the past. If you look at studies done 2,000 years ago, studies done recently of you happen to be men buried in graves, so that has to be in Turkey, which is presently Turkey now. But there are many, many. This is one of the more recently reported ones. They found a 200 square foot plot where they found 60 bodies, and they were all male. And they had their occupational tools with them, which were spears and tridents and shields. And they had trident holes in their head. So it wasn't hard to figure out that these men were gladiators. When they analyzed the grave, which was about 2,000 years ago, the burial, they looked at their bones, and by checking the mineral content of the bones or the hair, you can do it with, what they found out is that these men were vegan. Yeah, they were pure vegan. They lived on barley. Barley was their main diet, and some beans. In fact, if you look at the historical writings about gladiators, they're known as the barley men.
Nice.
That's what they called it.
Nice, I love it.
And they compared them with the outside population, and which ate a richer diet. And they could see the difference.
And these were fierce warriors.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if you lost in the arena, in the gladiators' arena, that was a big deal. You didn't get to come back.
Yeah.
So there was great motivation on the gladiators' part to do well, but I think it went higher than that. It's just like if you're competing in the Kentucky Derby and you have a racehorse, you don't ask the racehorse what he wants to eat. You feed her or him whatever you know will cause them to win the race. So you've got people owning other people back then. And they didn't ask the gladiators what they wanted to eat. What they did is they fed them the food that would cause them to win. Now, the gladiators were the rock stars of the time. It wasn't that they didn't have enough attention or money or opportunities to get all the rich food they wanted, but that's what they ate.
Nice.
They're called the barleymen. But that extends to today. If you look at the marathon and triathlon winners, Boston, Chicago, Honolulu, this is over the past year and a half, the winners have been from Kenya and Ethiopia. The diet of people in that area of the world, of Africa, of that area of the world, is a diet primarily of corn. 80% of the diet is corn. The rest is other vegetables. So runners or any endurance athlete today knows, unless they're dissuaded by the liars, crooks, and cheats, which they are often, they know that the way to win a race, and we've known this for thousands of years, if you want to be a winner, you eat a starch-based diet, rice, corn, potatoes, etc. And anyway,
nice.
But you can go over and over throughout history because of this kind of analysis that we can do today, CAT scans and hair analysis, spectrophotometry, all kinds of things. You can tell a lot about people of the old. And history repeats itself always. Anything I talk about, you'll find on the website.
Okay.
You just can look it up. And
what's your website?
It's drmcdougall.com,
Okay.
drmcdougall.com.
Okay.
And pretty much everything I know is on the website.
Okay.
And it's all free, too, which really shocks people. The Inuit, or the Eskimo, has always been a relatively small population, and tens of thousands of people. And their average lifespan was 27 years. But they died from tough times. I mean, it was really cold.
Yeah.
A really rough environment out there. But
do you want me to read my question that I have for you for the Eskimos so we can kind of get into it? In your book, The Starch Solution, you mentioned the two tribes, the Inuit Eskimos and the Maasai, and how their diets are predominantly animal-based. You also mentioned that the women's breast milk and excretions were toxic. How dangerous and toxic are high-protein diets, and what would you recommend to people who are on one?
The Maasai, by the way, they were studied by George Mann. And the first time George Mann went down there was in the 70s and 80s. The first time he went down, he looked at the clinical evidence on people with heart disease and found the Maasai had no heart disease. He says, this doesn't make any sense. But he really didn't examine them carefully. He just said, did you have a heart attack? And so he went back and he did artery examinations, autopsy exams. And he found that the Maasai had worse atherosclerosis, in other words, more severe artery disease than Americans of comparable age. It says that they were so physically active that their arteries, as the plaque grew, their arteries grew also.
Interesting.
And so clinically, you couldn't find heart disease. But if you looked a little deeper into the artery structure and disease of the arteries, you found they were in horrible shape. So the Maasai are not an exception if you read both of George Mann's papers. As far as the Eskimo goes, the Eskimos have terrible atherosclerosis. In fact, the mummies that were examined under the same type of analysis I was just talking about, buried in, I guess, bogs or however they got buried, they were frozen. And 500 years ago, you find terrible atherosclerosis in these people, as of today. But of course, today it's different. Today, the diet of the Eskimo has changed a lot. I mean, they don't live in igloos. They don't have to hunt for their food. In fact, the way that they go fishing these days is with a green lure. A green lure, you drive up to you grab up to the window, you roll down your side window, you hand them a green lure, and that's how you get fish.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, that's the kind of fish. And the Eskimo has, I've talked to doctors and dentists, I have them as friends and patients. They tell me about how sick these people are. They're like the Pimans and the American Indian who lives among the whole U.S. population, or whatever recent immigrant population you can look at, like the Asian used to be very thin. I mean, that's what people still think about when they think about Asians. But in their real life in San Francisco or Orlando or Washington, D.C., you go even to the Asian barber shops or the Asian restaurants, and they're as chubby and as sickly looking as the Caucasian, the white.
Well, that's how we know it's not their genes, too.
It's not their genes. And you could see it in every population. It's not like there's some exception. So, you can see the population data is significant. But, the liars and cheaters, crooks out there, they know how to change the data to fool some of the people. I happen to be reading the literature for many decades, and I know how they cheat. But they cheat and lie, and I tell them right to their face, the high protein,
Good for you.
high fat, low carbers are liars and cheaters.
So what would you warn somebody that was on, say, a keto diet or paleo diet or any high protein diet?
These people are desperate. They've tried everything except fixing the problem. The problem is they're suffering from food poisoning due to the rich Western diet. The solution is to eat the diet of human beings, which is a starch-based diet. They haven't discovered that. In fact, they've been told over and over again, with the pleasure of the meat, dairy, and egg industry, and the fish industries, they've been told over and over again just how good it is to get all that protein and calcium, et cetera, and how bad it is to eat starch. So they really don't stand a chance. So there are very few people even look into the traditional diet of human beings. I used to say 10 billion people have walked planet Earth. And of those 10 billion that walk planet Earth, less than, maybe 2 billion. Maybe 2 billion people today eat other than a traditional diet. So I was corrected, by the way. It wasn't 10 billion. A professor wrote me and said it's 100 billion people have walked this Earth.
You think?
Yeah, well, we were talking about going back several 100,000 years.
Wow.
And to find people who didn't eat a starch-based diet is very difficult. They usually live on the extremes of the environment, like being Inuit Eskimos, or in some rare tribe someplace, or some religious belief. But somebody who wants to follow the diet that's designed for my cat, Einstein.
Where is Einstein?
Einstein's gone. He left us October 9th, 2017, when we went through the wildfires.
I'm sorry.
Well, he could still be alive. He was a very independent cat. But he used to come to my door every morning. And almost every morning he had a treat for me. And he'd smile with his big sharp teeth. He would bring a mouse or a mole or a little bird and smile and say, "Dad, look what I brought you."
Isn't that funny they do that?
If I'd left a potato out on the table overnight, he never ate that. This is great food for cats and lions and et cetera, but it's not the right food for people. If I gave a baked potato to Einstein, what would he do with it?
Einstein. That's the perfect name for your cat.
Yeah. He bat it around like a ball of yarn. And if I fed it to him, boy, the animal rights people are really going to get upset now. Let's just say I took a gastric tube and stuck it down into his stomach and fed him mashed potatoes.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks, he'd be a pretty sick or almost dead cat. Now, how would I fix him? Well, I could do what I'm traditionally taught in medical school to do, which would be the first thing is to get him some exercise. So I'll take old Einstein, I'll take the dog leash, and I'll walk him around the block 2 blocks a day.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think will happen in 2 weeks to Einstein? He'll still be a sick, dying cat.
Right.
Or I could do what else they tell us to do in medical school and other education, is to provide psychological comfort. So every day I'm going to reach down, I'm going to scratch Einstein's ears and his coat, and for 2 weeks I'll do that. What do you think I'll have? A sick Einstein. And how do you think I make Einstein better? Put him back on Einstein's diet. It's the same thing with you folks. It's the same thing. You're living on a diet designed for, well, you wouldn't even feed it to your cat. The Humane Society would be after you for giving them ice cream and cake.
I know.
That's true. This is crazy.
That's true.
But the problem is you are living on the wrong food. And until you understand the importance of starch, you're finished. You will not get it.
In your book, you talk about how you would eat multiple plates full of animal-based foods and somehow still be hungry and unsatisfied. Yes. What are your thoughts on eating disorders or addictions that could be stemming from eating the wrong toxic foods?
I think this is the main problem. People are looking for satisfaction, and they don't find it because they're eating the wrong food. The food for Einstein. They're not eating the right food, the food for a cat.
Yeah.
So they're looking for satisfaction, and they don't get it. They get done eating and they're still hungry. I remember how I used to be. I'd eat 2 or 3 big plates of animal foods and oils. And, when I got to my 4th plate, I was still hungry. If I had room for one more pork chop, I'd have stuffed it in because I never got satisfied. And people talk about being obsessive compulsive overeaters, that they're psychologically sick, or they go to see psychiatrists because they think they have an eating disorder.
Yeah.
Because they say to themselves, why could I still be hungry? I just ate 4 plates of food.
Yeah.
Well, nothing registers. So when you leave, you're looking for the candy machine or something.
Yeah.
Because it's starch, it's the sugar. Starch is sugar. It's the carbohydrate that satisfies the hunger drive. That's the way we're built. We have taste buds that taste sugar. We actually have a whole set of taste buds that are just as strong that taste starch independent of sugar.
Interesting.
We have taste buds that repulse oil on our taste buds. Now my cat Einstein, he has taste buds for aminos, protein. He has no taste buds for carbohydrate. So the problem is that you are being lied to by very powerful industries. You think mainly about the food industry. They want to sell eggs and fish, and that's their job.
Yeah.
And they'll do anything, including lie. And that's what they do, is they lie about protein, calcium, omega-3s, et cetera. And they get away with it. Nobody's willing to make them stand up for what they say. The person doesn't have a chance. They're taught that they need this high-protein diet by industry. Now, not only does industry benefit, but I think where you come from, which you're just as passionate about as I am, as the pharmaceutical and the device industries. But it goes further than that. The reason you have these big hospitals and cancer centers and heart centers in your town, they're the biggest, sharpest buildings in town. Yeah, it's because of so much disease caused by eating the wrong food. And hey, the doctors don't mind either.
Because they're getting paid.
If, a 7-minute office visit to push a drug to treat a food poisoning problem is a good way to make money. So there's a whole line of people who are benefiting financially off of this. And of course, I was raised, and probably you were too, on a diet where the primary taste was salt. And we were taught, my parents loved me. They wanted me to be healthy, but they had misinformation. And as a result, I was a very, very sick young man until I learned to eat well.
And what are your thoughts on the terms grain brain and wheat belly? Are grains really detrimental or beneficial to our brains and bodies, and why?
The grain brain. If you look at William Davis, who wrote the wheat belly, look at his belly.
Oh, does he have a belly?
He's got a wheat belly.
Oh, no.
I mean, what you'd imagine is like this. And most of the low-carb, high-protein diet gurus are fat and sick. You can see it like Sally Fallon, Robert Atkins, the guy who wrote The Zone, Barry Sears. These are fat, sick people. Whereas you look at our camp, and you'll see, by and large, very trim, fit, healthy people who look much younger than their stated age. It's obvious. People should be able to see it. Anyway, because we learned a diet that was wrong, it kind of sticks with us. And it's initially a little hard for people to change, but not much, because they get to eat the foods they like. People love bean burritos and spaghetti marinara sauce and oatmeal and mashed potatoes. I could live on mashed potatoes and a few green vegetables and a great gravy. And I bet a lot of people out there would say the same thing if they knew it had enough protein, enough calcium. That would make them run faster and look better and take care of their skin. And if they knew that, keep them out of the operating rooms, if they knew that, which is all true, then they would quickly see that they should be eating this food, and they'd immediately love it. Because if they even know their eating habits now, most of them will see that what they really enjoyed in the meal, they're able to get the chicken down after they put tons of salt and barbecue sauce and sweet and sour
all the sugars.
Sauce. The sugar and the salt, which we would like to taste. I mean, they're able to get it down with enough covering. They won't eat boiled chicken. I haven't found anybody eat boiled chicken yet, or boiled beef.
I think
they won't eat it raw either.
Some people used to tell me to eat, in the fitness world, eat boiled chicken. And I did, unfortunately.
Did you eat it without sauce?
No.
Well, you should try it without sauce.
I know. I tried, but it was horrible.
Oh, horrible.
It was horrible.
Well, it's because it's not our food. But Einstein, my cat, he'd jump over the meat counter at Whole Foods.
Oh, Einstein's aggressive.
He'd claw the butcher to get into his food.
That's how I am at Whole Foods with fruit.
Yeah, well, it's that way with people if they stop and think about it. They have most of them have some background. Most of the people listening to this, where grandma, would serve starch. It would identify the meals as well. We're having, rice something or other, or potato something or other, and we'll have chicken on Sunday. Most people recognize that in friends and relatives, starch eaters, and they remember them as being really healthy people, trim people.
Yeah.
But that's all changed. It's changed particularly since 1980. The food industry took control in 1980. It happened to be when they wrote the dietary goals for the U.S. It was actually 1977, February. What they tried to do is they tried to replicate what Luther Terry did in 1964 with smoking. He wrote the report on smoking and tobacco and health for the U.S., which changed the whole country and the world. Back then, over half the population, including myself, smoked. And now, fewer than 20% of people smoke in the U.S. But what the smoking industry did, which the food industry has done, and the alcohol industry has done too, as people have learned about the dangers of these, is they've taken third world countries. And, like, for example, in Japan, 60% of the population smokes. They don't have any anti-smoking campaigns in Africa, as far as I know. So
Europe, everybody smokes too. Still.
They just picked up other markets, so they've lost nothing except the U.S. market. Well, anyway, in 1977, the food industry through lobbyists and money, got the dietary goals changed by the end of 1977 to ones that favored their industries. Yeah. And ever since, they've been working as hard as they can to not end up like big tobacco and big alcohol did. And they have won. I never thought they'd win. That was in 1970. And they have, they've not lost their grip. Whereas food does more damage to the environment, more damage to communities, to families, to individuals than tobacco, cocaine, heroin, alcohol, all these put together. All of them put together, it does more food does more damage to the environment. I mean, alcohol, cocaine, and tobacco do actually good things for the environment.
Don't do those.
No, don't do those. But you get my point.
Yeah.
And if you look at the harm done to families and communities by those drugs, they're far less than what's done by food. I mean, consider by food, half the population has heart disease. 80% of the population is overweight. They're all constipated. Few suffer from chronic diarrhea, but I mean, they're sick. Half the population of the U.S., more than half, is pre-diabetic. 14% are diabetic. It's because of the wrong kind of food.
Yeah.
It is only the problem. This is not exercise, although it's good for you. You need some. It's not lack of sunshine, although it's very important you get sunshine.
Yeah.
It is in part for some of your bad habits, what we mentioned, like cocaine and heroin, tobacco and alcohol. I mean, those things are killing you. I mean, I don't want to put them totally out of place. I just want to put food in its relevance.
For sure.
People are dying of heart disease. So food is much more damaging. As far as the environment goes, we mentioned that these plants grown into drugs are actually beneficial for the environment. Whereas the World Watch Organization, when they did their assessment of the damage of livestock in the environment, they determined that 51% of the greenhouse gases are produced by the livestock industry. The World Health Organization, they came up with a more conservative data. They said 18%, which was more than all transportation or
boats,
heating,
planes, automobiles, everything combined.
Everything combined,
That's big.
I mean, food is the biggest thing. And the other thing about food, those of you interested in the environment, which I am. I mean,
Me too. That's my next question
having
too.
7 grandkids who have no future. They have no possibility. I know that. I mean, just every week.
Unless we start changing quick.
Well, yeah, all of us would have to change. We'd all have to make really serious changes, and we'd probably have to say goodbye to half the people on Earth to save the planet. There's just too many people. But with food, we could give ourselves a head start because, if President Obama and Carter and Bush and, the other leaders in this country and other countries like Putin in Russia and, the Prime Minister Modi of India, if these people could have stood up and said, hey, folks, you're going to change your diet tonight.
Oh, that would be
to
amazing.
a starch-based diet. We could change the course of global warming and the course of the world without doing the other things, even though they need to be done. But there's things like putting everybody on a Tesla or equivalent will take 20 years. And putting solar panels on rooftops will take 20 years. The food thing we could do tomorrow.
That's true.
So it's the biggest and most useful opportunity that we have is to get the food message out, but it's the least talked about. If you watch the scientific journals, the newspapers, they're willing to talk about cars and they're willing to talk about solar panels, but I don't ever see them talking about food. Remember, over half the greenhouse gases are produced by the livestock industry, and we can change this tomorrow by just saying no. But what can I tell you? I'm still optimistic, even though I have to be unrealistic to be that way.
Good, I'm glad.
I have to get up in the morning and say, not just my 7 grandchildren, but there are 330 million people in the U.S. There's 7 billion people on planet Earth that really need to hear this message.
They do.
So Mary and I keep getting up with a smile and saying, we're going to get them today.
Me too. Are fish and fish oil really good for us? And what about the effects it has on ocean life? Let's touch on PCBs, dioxins, and heavy metals.
Well, the main problem with fish is also like other muscles, pig muscle, cow muscle. It's just fish muscle. They have a similar negative impact on the human body. They cause weight gain because they're fatty, and they cause bone loss because they're high in protein. They have no dietary fibers, they lead to constipation. It's almost the same as you'd expect from eating other mussels from animals. So there really isn't a health advantage to eating fish, except for maybe chicken and pork and beef are worse, and you're replacing those. So I'll give them a little bit, maybe a little advantage, but not much.
Okay.
The thing that's happened with fish is they are hyperaccumulators of toxins in our environment. They're high in the food chain. So high in the food chain is the contamination that you can tell how much fish a person eats by measuring the methylmercury content in their body. You can tell almost to the biteful of how much fish they eat based on the methylmercury accumulated in the body.
Are there any safe levels in any fish of mercury?
No, methylmercury is a poison. It's like ask me about arsenic
And it's in all fish?
Yeah, it's pretty much in all fish, unless they were raised in a special environment. This pollution extends, and I just mentioned methylmercury. We could mention probably 1,000 other poisonous chemicals that accumulate in fish.
Yep.
And besides that, they're almost gone. In the 1950s, when I was a young boy and I was getting interested in the ocean, scuba diving and so on, compared to now, 90% of the fish are gone. And I tell people who keep hanging on to fish, I say, you better eat up fast, because only 10% of them are left from when I was a boy. Because pretty soon they're not going to be any available for you. So eat where you have a chance, if you still believe. It's terrible what's happened to our ocean life, and I'm a real ocean lover.
Me too.
So, yeah, the fish need to be left alone, period. And you're fooling yourself if you think they're healthy and you're doing anybody any good at all.
What are your thoughts on vaccines, and do you think autism is a risk factor?
It's not, and I want you to take the advice knowing that I'm not an expert.
Okay.
I pretty much studied the effects of flu vaccines. I've written an article in my newsletters on that, which you can read at drmcdougall.com.
Okay.
And what it says is that flu vaccines are a fraud. They're a very, very profitable fraud. And the reasons I know they're a fraud is because I read the science. And the scientific papers, as they review the results of mass immunization, show virtually no benefit from getting flu shots. You know it's a fraud because you walk into Safeway or other supermarkets and they give you 10, 20% off on your groceries. Every time I call for a prescription, I get a lecture on vaccines. Oh, I need to buy the flu vaccine. Somebody's making some money here.
Yeah.
Anyway, the research is consistent, so I recommend against people in general taking the flu vaccine.
Okay.
However, I don't want to throw the baby out with the wash water. All of my children and grandchildren are fully immunized. hepatitis A, hepatitis B. I don't know when they get old enough to get the HPV vaccine, what I'm going to do. There's a lot of controversy about that now. They had, DPTs, and if I could get smallpox vaccine, I'd get it for my kids and grandkids.
Okay.
That's the next biologic warfare. So.
Do you think autism is a risk factor? With
I
all the
don't
heavy
know
metals?
whether autism is a risk factor or not. Again,
Okay,
it's
yeah.
something I've not studied.
Yeah.
I've
Okay.
heard the point of view of the author that's accused of presenting false information. And I'm good friends with a lot of people who work with the British Medical Journal and other journals that publish.
What is IGF-1 and how does it contribute to aging?
IGF-1 is a insulin-like growth factor. That's what it stands for. And there are many growth factors in the body. These growth factors, of course, cause growth. And maybe they make people have more muscles. Maybe that's why your weightlifters are focusing on raising their IGF-1 levels. The harm is that when you stimulate growth every place, not just your muscles and your bones. You stimulate cancer growth. You stimulate overall body growth, and you age faster. So, you can't have it two different ways.
Yeah.
If you're going to stimulate growth, you're going to stimulate growth. The IGF-1 foods are primarily the high-protein foods, animal foods primarily, but there's one you need to know about, and that's isolated soy protein. Your fake burgers, your fake hot dogs, et cetera, they're very high in protein, isolated soy protein, and they cause an extremely high, even higher than milk, rise in IGF-1 levels.
Wow.
So those of you who are making your transition to vegetarianism, if you take the stop along the way too long of eating these fake foods, you're going to get some serious health problems, maybe more than you started out with.
What about edamame, like whole soy?
Well, that's a little different. These traditional soy foods that were made in their kitchen in the pantry of people for 5,000 years.
Yeah.
Didn't require any big processing or anything. I think they're fine as delicacies. We serve them at our clinic, our live-in clinic. And
Nice.
but people are taught that they're condiments. About 40% of the foods are identified, packaged foods are identified as being gluten-free and or GMO-free. There are certainly some people, maybe 1 in 250, maybe 1 in 100, in Western societies that suffer from celiac disease and other adverse manifestations of eating wheat, barley, and rye, which are the high-gluten foods. We want to make sure we pay attention to these people because they get very sick.
Yeah.
But about 40% of the population thinks they're sick from gluten problems, and they're really not. And so their focus of attention is on gluten, not where it should be. As far as GMO goes, oh, this is so emotional, I don't even mention it. As I say, look, I have never seen a case of GMO deficiency or a disease caused by GMO, and neither has any other doctor. And until we see the first case of damage from GMOs in people, I'm not going to change. Because what this is a dangerous distraction to be focused on things like fake foods, to be focused on gluten, to be focused on GMOs. It's a devastating, dangerous distraction that will cause Earth to burn in hell. The livestock industry is where their attention must be.
Yeah.
The data is absolutely clear. You want to look at cases of livestock poisoning to people? Well, I can point out maybe 80% of the population is being poisoned by livestock. But somehow or another, people's attentions are on things that are irrelevant. I mean, not that they're not of some importance,
No, I
but
understand.
if we're predicting a disastrous change in the environment within, last report I heard yesterday was within 12 years. You're not going to have time, even if it was true, unless you start focusing all of our attention, government, personal, family, community, all of our attention on getting the livestock out of our diet. And the only way you can do that is to have it be a starch-based diet. You've got to get the calories, the proteins, the vitamins. A starch-based diet is the most nutrient-dense, healthiest, most appetite-satisfying diet there is. It's the diet for human beings, just like cats are carnivores and parrots eat nuts. We all have a diet.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting?
Fasting, again, is not one of my expertise. Some of my very good friends run True North. I've good friends with them for 35 years. And fasting is the ultimate in a low cholesterol, low fat diet, low allergen diet. I mean, low all toxin diet because all you're drinking is water.
Yeah.
So people do get, they do get better. And it may be a good jump start for people. I mean, if you don't have anything to eat for 14 days, bread tastes like a steak. Water tastes like wine.
So what is intermittent fasting? How much time?
I don't know. I mean, the friends I have will fast people sometimes 14 days, sometimes 30 days, even longer.
Okay.
But the idea of, and again, I speak from an unexperienced person. But it really has not made any sense to me for people to say skip eating food on Friday or whatever, one day a week. Certainly, if you don't change the rest of your diet and lifestyle, when I say lifestyle, I do that with some hesitation because people focus on lifestyle, not diet.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine how fasting, would you say regularly, intermittently, would make any real difference.
Okay. Can a plant-based diet heal autoimmune diseases like MS? Have you had any success stories of patients being cured or managing symptoms to where they are normally functioning?
The autoimmune diseases is where the body attacks itself. Are some of the most fun diseases to treat.
Really?
Oh yeah, because they get better. The fun in medicine, if you happen to be on my end of the spectrum, is the fun in anything.
Yeah,
the real fun in anything is to help other people. That's where you get pleasure from.
Yeah.
And there are certain things like constipation, which disappears. So you can prove it to yourself in 2 days. The greasiness on your hair and skin go away in a couple of days. And most of the joint pains are gone in 4 days or 7 days. So you can prove the benefits to yourself. And I think the constipation thing is obvious to people. Well, the same thing happens with severe autoimmune diseases. We see a lot of rheumatoid arthritis patients, psoriatic arthritis patients, non-specific arthritis, lupus, and usually the benefits begin in about 4 to 7 days.
Wow.
Yeah, it takes about 4 months to clear the problems up that are acute. Now, the chronic damage, the bent joints, et cetera, that's permanent. But the attacks stop, and it's almost always within 4 months. I have several major articles I've written on it. Never contested, by the way. And my research and articles are published scientific journals, but somehow or another, I don't seem to have any contrarians, at least not to my face. Like, for example, we've had a paper published in the Journal of Nutrition on 1,615 of our patients who went through the clinic. And it's a 7-day study. They go through the clinic for 10 days in Santa Rosa, California. We didn't leave anybody out. We looked at all 1,615 people, or 1,615 people, and what we found was an average weight loss in 7 days. All this is within 7 days, eating as much as they wanted, food they loved.
Nice.
Average weight loss was 3.1 pounds. The average cholesterol drop was 22 points. Nearly 90% of people reduced or stopped all their diabetic and blood pressure medications, as well as most of the other medications. This is all documented. Not to say about the other things that went away, like their stomach pains and headaches and so on. So that paper is published in 2014 in the Journal of Nutrition, open access. The second study we did recently was with OHSU, which is the medical school in Portland, Oregon Health and Science University, which happens to be only 2 blocks from where I live now.
Nice.
Yeah. We did a big study. Our foundation paid for it. We spent $750,000 on it, which is about the amount of money it takes to study whether or not you're going to study a drug.
Interesting.
So all I was able to raise was $750,000, which is pretty substantial for my followers. And I went to OHSU, and maybe it was 2008 or so. And we started to study a randomized controlled trial where my only involvement was teaching the people. I did not pick them. I did not randomize them. I did not collect the data. I did not analyze the data. I did not publish the paper. In fact, I asked not to be named on the paper, but I had to be named on the paper.
Okay.
And that was published a couple of years ago. Tremendous results. Not necessarily in terms of the usual MS parameters, although fatigue was relieved in a huge number of the population. We got the same weight cholesterol drops that we expected, but they lasted a year. Our average weight loss at the end of a year, now these people didn't come for weight loss, they came for MS. And they were younger than our average population. The average weight loss was nearly 20 pounds.
Wow.
At the end of a year. The average cholesterol drop was about 20 points at the end of a year.
Nice.
The Department of Neurology, where we did the study at OHSU, one of our contacts, my principal investigator and the head of neurology, they looked at me and they said, we can't believe this, that we have an 85% adherence to the diet at 12 months. 85% of the people were complied with the diet at 12 months.
That's great.
Well, that says that they got good education, which they almost never get from their doctors or from any other study. We gave them our regular program. That's it. That was the education. And the food tastes great. And the results, those that needed to lose weight, maybe they lost 40 pounds. We had a guy come in for follow-up, and he said, he was a teacher, he said, I haven't been able to walk with my children, my 3 boys, in years. He said, I want you to know we're walking up mountains now. The head of neurology at OHSU, and my principal investigator was along with us, but
wow.
They said to me that they wanted to be known as the Diet and MS Center of the world at OHSU. Wow. But I have to tell you, 4 years after the study's been published, they've done virtually nothing in terms of diet. They're still pushing the drugs, which don't work and cost between $75,000 and $125,000 a year just for the drug, and they don't work in terms of primary outcomes.
But diet does.
Diet does. The head of neurology there, he said to me, he says, John, he says, I want you to know that in all my years of practice as a neurologist, I never had a person thank me for putting them on interferon beta. But he says, I want you to know, since we started the studies, I've had multiple people come in tears thanking me for helping them with their diet.
Wow.
Yeah. So, they know,
yeah.
and there are lots of other people in the MS business that know that you could stop this disease. In fact, this was published by Roy Swank 50 years ago, who happened to be a friend of mine before he died at 99.
Good life.
He was head of neurology for 23 years, Roy Swank was. So it's not that this stuff hasn't been published. You don't need another study. It's, it's proved to reverse heart disease, to drop blood pressure, to cure type 2 diabetes, to cure obesity, to cure constipation, to cure rheumatoid arthritis. It's proved. You don't need another study. You just need a reason to listen. And the problem is that people don't have a reason to listen, and the reason to listen would be money. The money goes to those who do the wrong things, the criminals. And they are criminals. They are liars and cheaters. They are criminals. The people who sell foods and drugs that they knowingly, just like in the tobacco industry, they put 7 executives on trial in front of our representatives. And they almost went to jail for lying to the public, the 7 tobacco executives.
Wow.
For lying about the addictive potential. About 10 years ago, this happened.
Maybe this will happen with the meat and dairy industry.
It should, because they are committing as much criminal behavior, and people that take your money and hurt you are called criminals. Okay? And, there's no way around it. Nobody has recognized what they're going on. Or they're starting to. They're starting to publish articles. There's one today in the New York Times on the crooked association between universities, research projects, and the various industries. They're all tainted. Almost all of them are tainted. And, the journals are starting to come out and admit that they're owned by the drug companies or the food companies. 70% of the research is tainted.
Because it's funded by industry.
Yeah, it's sponsored by industry, or they hide it. They know how to hide it. I can find it.
Yeah, you can.
But that's what the PLOS journal says, that 70% of the food ads or the food promotions are industry sponsored.
Why is oil detrimental to our health?
Well, when we talk about oil, we need a certain amount of quote fat, essential fat. And potatoes have enough, and so does rice. In fact, I know of no food that doesn't have enough fat. There's never been a case of fatty acid deficiency ever reported on a natural diet, ever. You absorb all your fat-soluble vitamins on a starch-based diet. You don't need to add extra oil. Oil is not food. It's an isolated, concentrated nutrient, just like other drugs, like digoxin or vincristine, a cancer drug. They take something from the periwinkle plant and turn it into a isolated, concentrated substance. Well, oil is an isolated concentrated substance. It's not a food. And it's 9 calories per gram, which is the highest of any calorie concentration of any food. It is pure oil. The fat you eat is the fat you wear. From my lips to my hips. You've heard that saying. You can biopsy somebody's body fat and tell what kind of fat that you like to eat.
Interesting.
Yeah, if they like trans fats, you can see it in their body fat by just taking a biopsy of their thigh or buttocks or abdomen.
Wow.
You can see the fish oil. So you can tell what they like to eat because the purpose of oil is to be stored. It's the stored calories, so when the day comes that people have no food because of war or climate change or whatever, that they'll survive for a while. Unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever you want to look at it, people have been preparing for a famine for the last 100 years. That hasn't happened in the United States, at least.
Yeah.
And they've stored up enough calories to last them more than a year. The fat you eat is the fat you wear, plan on it. It is the strongest promoter of cancer of all known common food substances, oil is, including olive oil. Mm-hmm. In fact, your polyunsaturated fats, the omega-6s, are very strong promoters of artery disease. Your omega-3s are very strong promoters of suppressing the immune system and bleeding. And all of them make you fat. So they're quite toxic. And all the studies that I'm aware of that have been published in the last 15 years on the relationship between omega fats or fish eating and heart disease all say it's fraud. Doesn't work. You know, old information that, came out concerning fish and fish oil has been turned around completely. You take a look, go to Medline, look at the scientific research and the summaries that have been published on eating fish fats, omega-3 fats, and the outcomes in terms of primary and secondary prevention of heart disease. It's just not there, folks. You've been lied to. It's a very profitable industry.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Love, Gianna.
And Dr. John McDougall.